At precisely 8:14 p.m. on a cool spring evening in Manhattan, the music stopped. Adrian Hale, 32, a prodigy from Brooklyn whose fingers had once been called the voice of angels on piano keys, collapsed in front of a sold-out crowd at Carnegie Hall. The stunned silence that followed was broken only by gasps and the clatter of chairs as audience members stood in shock. In black and white photos that would flood newspapers the next morning, Adrian's limp form lay sprawled across the glossy stage, the grand piano still vibrating with the final haunting note he would ever play. The tragedy stunned not only New York, but the world. Hale was no ordinary musician. He was the hope of a generation. Raised in the tough streets of Bedford-Stuyvesant, he had clawed his way out of poverty, using music as both shield and sword. His story inspired millions. The boy who played on broken pianos in church basements, now commanding the world's finest stages. The voiceover in the media coverage echoed the public's disbelief. He was at the peak of his career, until Poison silenced the music forever. In Brooklyn, in a modest apartment filled with family photos and fading recital programs, Adrian's mother, Maria Hale, could barely speak to reporters. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the last text he had sent her. "Big night, Ma? Feels strange though, dizzy, off balance. Maybe nerves." Her voice cracked as she recalled her reply. "It's just nerves, baby. You'll be fine." But Adrian wasn't fine. Hours later, doctors confirmed what no one wanted to believe. He had been poisoned. The toxicology report that came days after the autopsy was even more chilling. Adrian hadn't died of natural causes. His body contained traces of polonium-204, a rare and highly lethal substance. It wasn't something one could accidentally ingest. It wasn't found in food or water. This was deliberate. This was murder. As headlines screamed, "Pianist collapses on stage," and social media flooded with tributes and conspiracy theories, whispers began to swirl through the underbelly of the city's elite. Who would want Adrian Hale dead? A rising star with no known enemies, adored by fans, celebrated by critics. Yet here he was, gone in an instant, his future stolen. The final chilling line from the coroner's preliminary statement sent a wave of fear through the Hale family and the world watching. This was no accident. And just like that, the narrative shifted. From tragic accident to calculated crime. The city that once celebrated Adrian's music now buzzed with darker questions. Who slipped him the poison? And more importantly, why? Before the world knew him as the Poisoned Pianist, Adrian Hale was simply the boy from Bed-Stuy who refused to give up. Born and raised in Brooklyn's Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood, Adrian grew up in the kind of poverty that makes dreams feel like distant stars. His father left when he was 5. His mother, Maria, worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses by day and serving tables by night, to keep food on the table for Adrian and his little sister, Lena. Music, for Adrian, wasn't just an escape. It was survival. The old church on Monroe Street had a battered upright piano missing 3 keys. That was where Adrian first laid his hands on music, and where people first noticed that this boy wasn't ordinary. By the time he was 12, his fingers could summon notes so powerful they made congregants weep during Sunday services. His playing wasn't about perfection. It was raw, emotional, haunting. It carried the weight of a childhood spent dodging gang violence and hunger. At 19, a local music teacher, Mr. Romano, took him under his wing. Romano mortgaged his own home to pay for Adrian's application to Juilliard, believing the young man was destined for something greater. And he was right. Adrian's acceptance into the world's most prestigious music school was the turning point. From there, the rise was meteoric. By 31, Adrian Hale had gone from playing on cracked ivory keys in a Brooklyn church to commanding stages in New York, Paris, and Tokyo. Critics called him the soul of the city, channeled through 10 fingers. Fans lined up for hours just to hear him play. And when he signed a major international tour deal with Helios Productions, he was poised to make history, the youngest pianist ever to headline a solo European tour at the Royal Albert Hall in London. It was meant to be his victory lap. But success, Adrian would later tell friends, came with shadows. In the months leading up to his final performance, those closest to him noticed subtle changes. He became more withdrawn, more anxious. He stopped sharing details about his travel plans. He started missing rehearsals, something unheard of for the disciplined musician. And then there were the threats. Anonymous letters sent to his home, cryptic messages like, "You stole what was never yours." His sister Lena found one such note crumpled in the trash weeks before his death. But it wasn't until after Adrian collapsed that the most disturbing clue emerged. As investigators combed through Carnegie Hall's security footage, they spotted something chilling. Minutes before Adrian took the stage that night, backstage cameras captured him in what appeared to be a heated argument with a woman. Her identity? Unknown. Her face, partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. The footage showed Adrian gesturing sharply, his face tight with anger, a rare break from his usually calm demeanor. The woman, in contrast, remained cold, motionless, before turning and disappearing down the corridor. The exchange lasted less than 2 minutes. But for investigators, it raised a terrifying question. Was this woman connected to the poison that ended Adrian's life? Or was she just another player in a darker conspiracy that no one had yet begun to understand? As the Hale family mourned, and the world demanded answers, the image of Adrian, captured forever mid-argument, minutes before his collapse, would haunt the case. The boy from Brooklyn who had overcome everything life threw at him, except, perhaps, the enemy's success had quietly gathered in his shadow. Lena Hale had always looked up to her big brother. To the world, Adrian Hale was the piano prodigy who rose from the streets of Bed-Stuy to grace the world's greatest stages. But to Lena, he was simply Ade, the boy who used to hum lullabies to calm her during the gunshots at night, the brother who gave up his own meals so she could eat. So when Adrian died on that stage, Lena's grief was not just deep, it was consuming. And almost immediately, something didn't sit right with her. Just days after the funeral, Lena's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging. Let him rest." The text was brief, but the threat was unmistakable. More followed over the next few days. "You don't want to end up like him. Some stories are better left unfinished." At first, she thought it was the cruel work of internet trolls, people exploiting her family's pain. But then, as she sifted through Adrian's old belongings, she found his journal. Inside were scribbled entries from the weeks leading up to his death. "Feel like someone's watching me. Saw the same black car twice outside my apartment. Getting letters again. They know. Tired. Just want this tour over." The more Lena read, the more her heart clenched. Adrian hadn't just been struggling with pressure, he'd been afraid. Then came the blow that deepened the mystery. 3 weeks before Adrian's death, his first and only mentor, Mr. Romano, the man who believed in him before the world did, had been found dead in his Queens apartment. The cause? A fall down the stairs. The ruling? Accidental death. But now, in the context of everything else, Lena couldn't ignore the possibility. Was Romano silenced before he could warn Adrian about something? Her suspicions took her to Dr. Elise Grant, an independent forensic toxicologist who had been quietly investigating Adrian's poisoning. Dr. Grant's analysis uncovered a critical detail that the police had overlooked, or perhaps chosen to ignore. The poison, Dr. Grant explained, was laced directly into Adrian's water bottle. Backstage, minutes before he went on stage. She paused, letting the weight of that sink in before continuing. "Which means," she said softly, "it wasn't random. Someone who had access backstage. Someone close." Lena's world spun. Her brother had always been surrounded by a tight inner circle, trusted staff, fellow musicians, and old friends. The idea that one of them could have betrayed him, killed him in cold blood, was almost too much to bear. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. The footage of the unknown woman backstage, the threatening messages, the shadowy black car, and now, the forensic proof that this was no accident. As Lena sat in her apartment, piecing the clues together, another message flashed across her phone. "You're next." Her hands trembled. The piano prodigy from Brooklyn had been silenced. But his sister? She was just getting started. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching, and growing increasingly desperate to keep the truth buried. Lena Hale's search for answers took an unexpected and painful turn when she stumbled upon something her brother had kept hidden even from family. Adrian, it turned out, had been entangled in a complicated, secret relationship with Isabelle Durant, a brilliant, fiery French pianist who had been making waves in the same elite music circles. At first glance, Isabelle and Adrian had appeared to the public as respectful rivals, occasionally sharing the stage, and even performing duets that sent critics into a frenzy. But behind the scenes, their relationship had been far more personal and volatile. Lena discovered this truth when she hacked into Adrian's old email account and found a string of messages, passionate, raw, and increasingly bitter. One email from Adrian read, "This can't go on, Izzy. Not with the tour starting. It's over." And Isabel's chilling reply, "You think you can walk away? After everything? I won't be discarded like this." The discovery rocked Lena to her core. Had love turned into jealousy? Had heartbreak driven Isabel to murder? Determined to find out, Lena tracked down every public interview Isabel had given since Adrian's death. To her surprise, or perhaps horror, Isabel's demeanor was unnervingly cold. In one interview, when asked about Adrian, Isabel simply said, "We respected each other. Competition is normal in this world. No tears, no visible grief, just a wall of detached professionalism." But then came the bombshell. Security footage from the concert hall, obtained by Lena through an anonymous source, showed Isabel Durant entering Adrian's private dressing room the day before his fatal collapse. She stayed inside for nearly 20 minutes. No official record mentioned this visit. Isabel never disclosed it in her statements. The footage ignited a media firestorm. Speculation spread like wildfire. Had Isabel confronted Adrian one last time? Had she threatened him? Poisoned him? Lena's instincts screamed that this was the breakthrough she needed. Everything pointed to Isabel. The secret affair, the bitter ending, the suspicious backstage visit. It all fit too perfectly. But then, just as quickly, that neat narrative unraveled. Further investigation of the security logs revealed a crucial timeline. Isabel had indeed been in Adrian's dressing room, but she had left long before the poisoned water bottle appeared. Surveillance showed Adrian's assistant bringing in the water hours later, after Isabel was already gone. This new fact turned everything upside down. If Isabel wasn't the one who poisoned him, then who had access to the bottle afterward? Had someone used the public suspicion against her as a smokescreen? Lena's heart pounded with both dread and determination. She was now caught in a maze of half-truths, rivalries, and hidden motives. Everyone around Adrian seemed to have secrets, but the real killer was still out there, hiding in plain sight. And as Lena dug deeper, one terrifying truth became clear. This wasn't just about a love triangle gone wrong. It was something darker, bigger, and far more dangerous. Just when Lena Hale thought the web of lies surrounding her brother's death couldn't get more tangled, a new name surfaced: Victor Mendez. Victor was no stranger in the classical music world. Hailed as a prodigy from Buenos Aires, he had been Adrian's fiercest competitor for years. But underneath the glossy magazine covers and standing ovations, there was bitterness brewing. Months before Adrian's sudden collapse, both he and Victor had vied for the same coveted European headline tour. It was supposed to be Victor's victory lap, his long-awaited ascent to the pinnacle of international fame. But when the committee chose Adrian instead, whispers started circulating. Whispers that Victor had taken the loss personally, perhaps too personally. Lena uncovered a damning thread when she came across a blog post from an underground classical music forum. An anonymous user hinted, "Victor's not the type to take defeat quietly. He has connections." At first, it sounded like baseless gossip. But then came the breakthrough. A private investigator hired by Lena traced Victor's financial records, and what they found sent chills down her spine. Victor had recently been linked to a black market dealer known in European circles for trading in rare, almost undetectable poisons derived from exotic plants. The same kind of toxin that, according to forensic experts, had ended Adrian's life. When pressed by authorities, Victor presented an alibi. He claimed he had been in a locked rehearsal with his ensemble the entire afternoon before Adrian's fatal performance. On paper, it seemed airtight. But the cracks began to show when one key member of Victor's team, his longtime percussionist, suddenly vanished without explanation. No interviews, no statements, no trace, just gone. The disappearance set off alarm bells. Was this missing musician silenced to protect Victor? Or had he fled out of fear, knowing too much? As the investigation deepened, an even more suspicious detail emerged. Victor had made a large cash withdrawal, nearly $50,000, from a discreet account just one day before Adrian's death. No one knew what the money was for. No purchases were recorded. No travel. Just a huge sum taken out in cash, and then nothing. To Lena, The pieces were starting to fit together in a grim pattern. Victor, spurred by jealousy and humiliation, had motive. He had access to the very poisons that could have killed her brother. He had an alibi that was beginning to crumble. And now, evidence of a mysterious payout right before Adrian's collapse. But despite the growing mountain of circumstantial evidence, there was still no direct link. No smoking gun tying Victor's hand to that poison water bottle. It was enough to enrage public opinion, but not enough to bring formal charges. Victor continued to perform, his career stained but not destroyed, while Lena watched the man she suspected of killing her brother stand on grand stages and bask in applause. And yet, just as she felt the case stalling, an unexpected lead appeared, a tip-off that the missing percussionist had been spotted in a remote town in Portugal. A man who might hold the key to blowing the case wide open. The chase wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Just when Lena Hale thought she'd uncovered every possible suspect, a bombshell discovery shifted the spotlight closer to home. In her quest for answers, Lena obtained a copy of Adrian's will, a document she assumed would be straightforward. But buried in the legal jargon was a startling change that no one in the family had mentioned. Just 6 months before his death, Adrian had amended the will. He removed his cousin, Adrian Hale, from his list of beneficiaries. Derek wasn't just family. He was Adrian's trusted business manager. For years, Derek had handled bookings, contracts, and even the financial side of Adrian's growing empire. But the revised will made it clear, Derek was to receive nothing. Lena's heart pounded as she read the line again and again. Why would Adrian cut out someone so close? Digging deeper, Lena learned why. Adrian had grown suspicious in the months leading up to his final tour. He'd confided in a close friend, saying that money was disappearing from his accounts. Small sums at first, then larger, harder to explain. When Lena cross-referenced Derek's financial records, a darker picture emerged. Derek was drowning in debt, mostly from underground gambling rings across New York City. Loan sharks had been circling, and his name had been quietly blacklisted by several casinos for unpaid debts. But the most damning discovery came when Lena tracked down an insurance investigator. Quietly, and without Adrian's knowledge, Derek had taken out a life insurance policy worth millions, naming himself as the sole beneficiary. And here's the twist that made Lena's stomach turn. The policy had been activated just months before Adrian's death. In insurance terms, the timing was suspicious enough to trigger an internal red flag. But somehow, no formal investigation had followed. Either someone had been paid to look the other way, or Derek had covered his tracks too well. The deeper Lena dug, the more grotesque the betrayal seemed. Her brother, the rising star beloved around the world, had been surrounded by vipers not just in the cutthroat music industry, but within his own bloodline. And Derek, the man who once stood beside Adrian on red carpets and shook hands with executives, now looked less like a grieving cousin and more like a man with everything to gain from Adrian's death. The gambling debts, the secret insurance windfall, the removal from the will that turned Derek from heir to enemy. It was a cocktail of motives that couldn't be ignored. And yet, Derek continued to play the part of the devastated family member in public, even while his private accounts showed large sums being funneled through offshore holdings. As the walls closed in, Lena realized the chilling possibility. While everyone had been looking at rival musicians and jealous lovers, the person who may have orchestrated Adrian's death had been sitting at family dinners, smiling at them all. But there was one thing Derek didn't count on. Lena had just uncovered the name of the insurance agent who signed off on that massive policy. A man who had since disappeared, but not without leaving a trail. And as Lena prepared to follow that trail, she vowed that this time, the truth would come out, no matter how ugly it was. Just when Lena Hale thought she had pieced the whole ugly puzzle together, the real betrayal cut deeper than anything she'd imagined. And this time, it wasn't from the snakes in Adrian's professional circle. It came from her own family. Her investigation had already led her to Derek's suspicious insurance policy, but a closer look at the paperwork revealed a chilling detail. Adrian's signature on the forms looked off, slightly slanted, uneven, and missing the unique flourish Adrian always added. A handwriting expert confirmed what Lena feared. The signature was forged. But the real gut punch came when she dug into the policy's approval process. According to the insurance company, a family co-signer, had signed the necessary consent forms to activate the policy. The name listed? Eleanor Hale, Lena's and Adrian's own mother. Lena's heart sank. She confronted her mother, who at first looked confused. But when Lena showed her the documents, Eleanor's face crumbled. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a long moment, she couldn't even speak. Then the truth tumbled out between sobs. Eleanor admitted that, months before Adrian's death, she had secretly approached Derek for help. Their mother had been drowning in medical bills from a chronic illness she had kept hidden from her children. Too ashamed to admit she was falling apart financially. Derek, ever the smooth talker, had offered a solution. A simple financial form that would allow him to free up some family assets to help cover her treatments. In desperation, and without reading the fine print, Eleanor had signed whatever Derek put in front of her. She never knew that the papers were connected to a multi-million-dollar life insurance policy taken out on her own son. And when Adrian died, she thought it was a tragic, random act, never realizing her signature had helped set the entire plot in motion. "I never thought it would come to this," Eleanor wept, her voice breaking. "I didn't know they'd kill him. I just wanted to get better. I just wanted to live long enough to see him play in Paris." Lena stood frozen, torn between rage and heartbreak. The realization crushed her. Her family wasn't just a victim of outside evil. They had been pawns in a much larger, more sinister game. But the final twist came when the police, acting on Lena's evidence, arrested Derek at his upscale condo. The press captured images of him in handcuffs, his face a mask of arrogance even as reporters shouted accusations. Yet, during interrogation, Derek's words sent chills through the room. "You think I poisoned him? No, I just set the stage." His smirk widened as he leaned back in the chair. "I wanted the money, yes, but I didn't touch him. Someone else did the dirty work. Someone much closer to Adrian than you think." The room fell silent. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just about the insurance. There was still another layer to this plot, a darker hand pulling the strings, hiding in plain sight. And as Lena left the police station that night, the weight in her chest grew heavier. Her brother's death wasn't solved yet. The real killer was still out there, watching, waiting. The ultimate betrayal had only just begun to unfold. Just when Lena thought she'd exhausted every lead, a breakthrough cracked the case wide open, and it came from the very shadows behind Adrian's glittering stage career. One of the backstage staffers, pressured under hours of questioning, finally broke down. His words sent shockwaves through the investigation. It wasn't Derek. It wasn't Victor. It was someone closer. Simon. Simon Graves. Simon Graves. Adrian's longtime manager. His friend. His so-called mentor who had guided him from the cramped piano bars in Brooklyn to the grand stages of Europe. The man who had stood beside the Hale family during the memorial service, shedding crocodile tears and vowing to find justice. Lena's stomach churned. The staffer detailed everything. Simon had personally handled Adrian's water bottle on the night of his fatal performance. The poisoned drink wasn't an accident, nor was it planted by some distant rival. It was slipped in by Simon, the man Adrian had trusted most. When police confronted Simon with the mounting evidence, the mask finally dropped. Cornered and sweating, Simon confessed in a cold, bitter voice that chilled everyone in the room. "He was going to fire me," Simon spat. "After everything I did for him, I made him. I built his career from nothing. And he was ready to replace me with some hotshot agent from London. Like I was trash." His eyes, once sharp and calculating, now burned with twisted resentment. "I gave my life to him. And what did I get? A pink slip. I wasn't going to be discarded. Not after everything. So, I took what I was owed." The investigation uncovered even darker motives. Not only had Simon been bribed by members of Victor Mendez's camp, offering him a hefty payout to eliminate their competition, but he also stood to gain millions by selling Adrian's unreleased music catalog posthumously. Record labels were already circling like vultures, offering staggering sums for the exclusive rights. It was a betrayal layered with greed, pride, and personal vengeance. Simon saw Adrian not as a prodigy or a friend, but as a product, a commodity that was worth more dead than alive. The confession sent shockwaves through the music world. Fans who had once admired Simon's role in Adrian's rise were now turning against him in droves. Social media erupted in fury. Streets outside the courthouse filled with supporters holding candles, photos of Adrian, and signs demanding justice. And as the court prepared for trial, the weight of the world seemed to press down on that single building. Every news outlet carried the headline: Simon Graves, the manager who poisoned his own star, trial of the decade begins. The betrayal was complete, and the eyes of millions, from New York to Paris, now watched with bated breath, waiting to see if true justice would finally be served for the poisoned pianist who had once stolen their hearts with every haunting note. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial of the century drew to a close. The case of the murder of Adrian Westfield, the beloved pianist whose talent had captivated the world, had left a trail of confusion, sorrow, and bitterness. It seemed like the story of his life, with its tragic end, was yet another chapter in the dark narrative of betrayal and ambition. But now, justice was finally being served, albeit with a bittersweet sense of finality. Victor Mendez, Simon Graves, and Derek, three men whose paths had been intertwined with Adrian's in ways that were both professional and deeply personal, sat before the jury, each waiting for the verdict that would seal their fates. Victor, Adrian's former mentor, had been the first to betray the young prodigy. He was the one who had pulled Adrian into the cutthroat world of high society, where talent was often treated as a mere commodity. It was in this world that Victor's greed had ultimately led him to manipulate Adrian's career for his own gain. The powerful businessman had been inextricably linked to Adrian's success, but when it became clear that Adrian was a threat to his empire, Victor had acted with cold ruthlessness. His role in orchestrating the false accusations against Adrian and silencing him for good was undeniable. His conviction was certain, and the gavel soon fell with a harsh finality, sentencing Victor to a 50-year prison term. Derek, once Adrian's closest friend, Derek had stood by him through the early days, sharing their dreams of conquering the world with music. But something changed. As Adrian's fame grew, Derek's jealousy festered. Feeling overshadowed and overlooked, Derek's resentment grew. The final straw had come when Adrian's growing influence threatened to unravel Derek's own ambitions. It was Derek who had made the fatal decision to silence Adrian, an act of betrayal that would forever stain his conscience. Though Derek had hoped to escape justice, the evidence against him was irrefutable. His conviction was a blow to the soul of the music world, leaving a sense of tragedy that would never fully dissipate. Derek was sentenced to 50 years imprisonment. Then there was Simon Graves, the charming and influential concert promoter, had once been Adrian's most ardent supporter. He was the man who had seen Adrian's potential and pushed him into the spotlight, but behind his smiles and promises lay a manipulative streak. Simon had used Adrian not only to make his mark on the music industry, but to satisfy his own vanity. As Adrian's rise began to eclipse Simon's own, envy had turned to contempt. Simon had sabotaged Adrian's career with subtle yet effective machinations. But when Adrian had finally fought back, Simon had gone even further, engineering a scandal that threatened to ruin everything. The trial revealed how Simon's greed and spite had fueled his role in Adrian's demise, and he was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, leaving the courtroom with the weight of his actions finally sinking in. Simon Graves was charged with murder and sentenced to death by hanging. Among those watching the trial unfold was Isabel Durant, Adrian's former lover. Throughout the investigation, her name had been dragged through the mud, with suspicions of her involvement in Adrian's death constantly swirling. But in the end, the evidence against her proved inconclusive. Isabel was cleared of any wrongdoing, though she remained haunted by the past. The years of public scrutiny, the media's incessant intrusion into her private life, had taken their toll. In a quiet act of defiance, Isabel stepped away from the public eye. The world would never see her again, and though her innocence had been proven, she chose a life of anonymity over fame. The bright lights that had once drawn her to Adrian were now forever dimmed, leaving her to fade into the background, a mere footnote in the tragedy. The aftermath of the trial was a bitter one for those who had loved Adrian, especially Lena, the young woman, who had been by Adrian's side through his darkest moments, found herself standing at the crossroads of grief and resolve. In the wake of Adrian's death, Lena became a symbol of hope, not just for the music community, but for the countless young people who had been inspired by Adrian's work. She channeled her pain into something greater, creating a foundation in Adrian's name, a cause dedicated to helping young musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds pursue their dreams. The foundation became a beacon of hope, providing scholarships, mentorships, and opportunities that Adrian had never had the chance to offer himself. Lena's work was a labor of love, but it also served as a form of redemption. She wanted the world to remember Adrian for more than just the tragedy of his death. She wanted his music to be heard, his legacy to live on. And so, in every note that rang out from the young musicians she helped, in every performance that carried his spirit, Adrian's memory was kept alive. But as Lena stood at the podium at the Foundation's first major gala, her heart ached with the weight of all that had been lost. She was surrounded by young faces filled with hope, but the shadow of Adrian's absence loomed large. The world had moved on, but for those who truly knew him, the pain of his loss remained fresh. With a heavy heart, Lena addressed the crowd. "Adrian's music will never die," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But let his story remind the world. Success comes with shadows, and trust can be the deadliest poison of all." Her words echoed in the silence that followed, a somber reminder of the price of ambition, the dangers of betrayal, and the way the world often chewed up its brightest stars. As Lena stepped away from the podium, she felt a chill wash over her, a deep sadness that would never fully fade, but also a sense of purpose. She was carrying Adrian's legacy forward, not just in the music, but in the lessons learned from the life he had lived. The evening ended with a haunting final piano recording. Adrian's voice, though long gone, filled the room with a resonance that could not be ignored. His music, like his story, would live on. As the last notes faded, a sense of peace settled over the crowd. Adrian may have been gone, but in the hearts of those who had been touched by his talent, by his pain, and by his triumphs, his spirit remained. And so, justice had been served, but the real lesson lay in the way the world would remember Adrian Westfield. His story was a reminder that the pursuit of greatness often carries a price, and that sometimes the shadows of our actions are darker than the light of success. The world would never forget Adrian, not just for his music, but for the way his story had taught them all the importance of trust, integrity, and the true cost of ambition.